Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about AWS CloudFormation. Today's speaker is Tomer Advan. He is our field CTO. He's been with Quali for a long time, and he is deeply involved with our product development and communications with our customers. So he has a lot of great insights I'm excited to share. A little bit of housekeeping. This is an open conversation. We have a Q&A functionality in the webinar panel, so please submit your questions anytime throughout the session. I will be monitoring those on the back end. We're going to save a little bit of time at the end of the session to answer those questions. And any questions we don't get to live on the call, someone from our team will follow up directly and make sure that you have any clarity that you might need. What to expect today. So we are going to start off with a couple of introductory slides. We don't want to bore anybody, but it helps for us to set the stage, right? In case you're not familiar with Quali or our products. We're going to walk through about 3 or 4 slides to help you understand what kind of problems we solve and how we work with our customers. And then from there, we're going to jump right into the demo. We have a lot of new product functionality around CloudFormation that I'm pretty excited to share. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Tomer to kick things off. Thank you, Tomer.
Awesome. Great, Colin. Thanks. And thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. As Colin said, my name is Tomer. I'm the field CTO here in Quali. And we're going to talk a little bit about CloudFormation, about some of the challenges that maybe some of you face in your day-to-day. We're going to talk a little bit about how scaling, how we think it's the best practice to scale cloud operation. And I think we're going to start from the basics. So Quali obviously has a lot of companies that we're working with, a lot of customers. And throughout those customers, I think that the most common things we feel in the infrastructure space today are 3 main challenges or 3 main things that we hear over and over and over. And this is that the infrastructure team, and by the way, they might be called DevOps team, Cloud Excellence team, Platform team, sometimes other names. It depends on the organizational context. But these 3 main things are really the pains that these kind of companies or organizations are trying to tackle. So it starts with complexity. Over time, solutions becomes really complex. It started with, in the past, it used to be, I need a VM, but now it's networking and serverless and PaaS services and external third parties that need to be communicated from the application itself. And things just grows over time. Complexity becomes something that's really, really challenging, whether you have one application that you need to maintain over time or hundreds. Now, with that, the number of people that requires the infrastructure really grows. So while the demand's growing, those people that's responsible for the infrastructure need to sustain, need to make sure all the tickets are fulfilled, and need to also manage that infrastructure over time. So regardless if you have more and more people that needs infrastructure, or you have more and more application that you need to maintain over time, the number of infrastructure component just grows and grows. And the last point is that the ecosystem grows. So you might need the infrastructure from a billing system. You might need that from your CI/CD system. It might be someone from the finance team that needs a VM. It might be a Jenkins or an ITSM process that needs that. Everyone needs environments. Everyone needs infrastructure. And at the end, that's the core of the business. So if you want to draw this reality really quickly and really focus on the things that I'm going to walk through in the demo, is that we have 2 main personas here. The one that's responsible for the infrastructure, he really understands what he wants to deploy. He really understands his customer or the market need. He designed the infrastructure. He architected the best deployment option, maybe with security in mind, maybe with scale in mind, maybe disaster recovery. But he really understands the cloud or the on-premise environment, by the way. And he needs to orchestrate that. He needs to launch that. He needs to operate that over time. On the other side are the people that really needs that infrastructure. And again, it might be a finance guy that needs a VM to run something on it. It might be the CI/CD system. It might be developers, testers, people that needs to run training sessions on your application. All of them needs infrastructure. And usually what we see is that that expert is one, and usually it's 10x to 20x people that actually need the infrastructure. So in huge organizations, we see this disproportional situation where a really small group of people need to sustain hundreds, thousands sometimes of consumers that requires the infrastructure. Now, maintaining the infrastructure or supporting that infrastructure obviously comes with cost on top of it. So it's not just that we have a VM on-prem or a VM in the cloud. There is some cost that attached to that infrastructure. In the cloud, it obviously might be the cloud cost. So we are paying hourly to AWS over that VM and the data and the storage, etc. But the guy that needs to support that infrastructure, his time is really valuable too. So we've got some operational cost to it. Now, if orchestrating that infrastructure takes time and those consumers needs to wait, that costs the organization more. And over, that infrastructure that was launched for a specific opportunity or purpose in the organization becomes something that its cost is growing and growing. Now, when we orchestrate infrastructure, we obviously need to make sure we are bounded to the governance, policies, compliance regulations within our organization. It might be something extremely simple in a small startup. It might be extremely complex in a financial service or a DoD environment, right? So the infrastructure must be compliant, and the experts needs to make sure that they are providing the right security tools, the right policies around it. And we need to make sure that only the right people have access to that infrastructure and only to that infrastructure. Lastly, the user experience is really important. Now we're talking about cost efficiency, and we're talking about maybe velocity of development in organizations. The user experience is really what I would phrase as how the end user, the infrastructure consumers, get the infrastructure in the right way. So just imagine a very complex cloud environment that was orchestrated, built, maintained by the infrastructure producer or operator. And now a QA engineer needs to go into AWS and figure out what's the right component to use. He will probably be lost in the hundreds of different entities, and he will probably gonna require some AWS education and permissions to do that. So when we're thinking about infrastructure and enabling infrastructure to consumers, we just want to make sure that they get the right things in the right way to their hands. Think about developers. They want to do things very fast. They don't want anything to disrupt them. They want a single page or a very easy to use system that will give them what they need. Maybe it's a VM, maybe it's a Lambda function, or maybe it's a database access. They need it extremely fast without any training in it. So with those things in mind, what Quali really promoting is how to really scale right with infrastructure that's growing, with complexity growing, with the demand growing, with the ecosystem. And it all starts with the assets. If you're here on this webinar, you probably already implemented some CloudFormation, CDK, Ansible, Helm charts, Crossplane, you name it, and you got some automation in-house. Now, the real question is how to enable that automation in a cost-efficient, secure, and in the right way to those consumers. It might be, again, for internal use, for partner use, for production use, but model that in the right way and enable that for the business to use that automation. Now, what Quali really brings to the market is the ability to take those assets and very, very fast build blueprints, which are configurations that takes those automation definition and define a reusable way to orchestrate and maintain them. Now, once you created your blueprint, you can publish that in a catalog. Think about a marketplace of configuration that can then be launched into environments. Those environments are the running instances of those blueprints containing those assets. And at the end, think about the CloudFormation you designed, you put it in a blueprint. Now, anyone, according to the role-based access control, according to the cost definition budgets, and according to compliance regulation, can go launch that over self-service if needed. And then those environments will be maintained over time. You will have great visibility, observability over what was launched. And lastly, in a scalable operation, you need a way to really figure out what's going on. So reporting is key. You want to get good observations, good recommendation, good understanding of how many things are running and their purpose. Now, in this webinar, we're going to really focus on controlling and managing your environment with CloudFormation, with other ISC technologies. And if some of this sounds familiar to you, that's really, really good. And I think that with that, we can move on to the demo and really show you a little bit about the product. Colin, anything to add so far? Are we good to move on to the demo?
Oh, good. No questions yet. I'll keep you posted.
Awesome. So I'm going to start from the beginning. And usually when we come over to an organization, especially an organization that's doing CloudFormation and AWS, we're starting from a service catalog mindset. So the IT organization or the platform engineering organization wants to create a catalog of all the services that are certified, secured, and in budget for the organizational need. Now, usually it might look like this. Here's a way to launch an EC2. Here's a way to launch an RDS. Now, think about this again as a marketplace of environment. And if this looks to you or sounds to you similar to AWS Service Catalog, that's really good because AWS Service Catalog shares some of the concept that I'm going to talk about here today. So here are some examples for things that we might need or we might want in our organization. And the self-service aspect here really allows me to go into this configuration and launch it in an on-demand manner under the organizational policies and the organizational configuration that someone configured for me. It might be an IT organization, a DevOps organization, or some other. Now, launching this environment basically, or this configuration basically kicks in an orchestration process. And in this case, these are 2 Terraform modules. And you will see in a second some CloudFormation related orchestration. And in this orchestration process, we're basically taking those existing assets you have, existing automation. Again, it might be Terraform, it might be CloudFormation, and we are starting to kick this to build this in the cloud. Now, right now, this is a Terraform orchestration. So you can see plan and apply and everything in this log view, but a lot of interesting things happens in the background. Now, let's move for a second from this service catalog approach and move to a different space in Torque. And spaces are basically different groups or different areas in the product. Different people might be associated to different spaces. They might have different permissions. And in those spaces, you might see different catalogs, different ways to automate, different permission levels, and at the end, different reports as well. So in this space, I have much more to offer. And it's not only the infrastructure building blocks, the service catalog as before. As you can see here, I have full configurations for infrastructure, applications, and also data in some cases. What I'm trying to say is that those predefined configurations that your infrastructure producer will build for you are really anything that you need to make sure that business need is fulfilled. Maybe that's testing. So in the testing configuration, you will need some testing tools installed in the environment. Maybe in the dev tools configuration, you will need some dev tools. So I have a bunch of different environments here, or a bunch of different blueprints, and we can take a look and see some more information about them. We can launch them. We can see how many times they were launched, how much time it will take. But let's move to environments that I've already launched prior to this webinar. So you can see a little bit also about how easy it is to manage environments. And as we said, one of the challenging things is not just to orchestrate, it's to manage over time. So in that manner, the environments view for this specific space is very interesting because you can see 3 different environments that are up and running. You can see that I've launched them, and each and every environment here will show slightly different things. So let's go into one of them and take a look what's in it. Now, this example is pretty much the same example I've presented before, but instead of having 2 Terraform building blocks, it has a CloudFormation building block and a Terraform one. Now, as we deploy the Terraforms, we can deploy different technologies. In this case, we've started with creating the stack in CloudFormation. Now, everything you need to do is to take your existing investment in CloudFormation, bring it into Torque, or actually point to Torque to it, and Torque will be able to discover it and deploy it. Now, I'm going to show you how to do it in a second, but what I want to show you here is that throughout this deployment process, we've done a lot of things that are really, really helpful and can help you or can enable you much more standardized way of deploying your infrastructure. First of all, the fact that this is a predefined configuration makes it really easy to control and makes it really easy to propose this to your consumers in exactly the right way. The configuration is one, but the deployment process might happen multiple times exactly in the same way. Torque will orchestrate everything and will make sure everything is set with the same configuration, same deployment process every time. Now, after the deployment, Torque will also provide visibility to all the resources that were created. So here's something that was created out of a CloudFormation orchestration. And you can see, by the way, all the different information about that deployment. So this S3 bucket has all of these ACL configuration, ARN, here's a bucket name. And honestly, as a user, I don't really need access to the cloud to get that. So the guys that are experts in the cloud can really focus on that, while the consumers can really focus on using an extremely easy to use self-service and getting the information without cloud access. Now, in order to use CloudFormation UI, in order to use AWS Service Catalog, you obviously need an AWS user. Here, you really don't. And this is a really important factor here because you don't need to share your keys to the cloud with anyone. So here is something that was deployed using CloudFormation. Here is something that was deployed using Terraform. And as you can see, the experience is exactly the same. Now, why is that important? Because CloudFormation now is, it's a great technology, but we see a lot of customers using more than one orchestration tool, more than one ISC technology. So aside to CloudFormation, we see CDK, we see Terraform, we see Helm, we see others, and we want to give you this flexibility to choose the right tools for the job. And we also want to give you the ability to use multiple different ISCs at the same configuration, again, for a specific purpose. Now, once you modeled your building blocks, you can always rip and replace some of them with something new. So let's say you would like to move from Terraform to Crossplane. That will be really easy because you will need to take a new Crossplane configuration, place that instead of that Terraform configuration, and here you go, you can just deploy that. Now, during the deployment process, you can see we have 2 different automation ISCs. We've deployed 4 resources, but throughout the deployment, we've also tagged everything. And this is crucial. We want to make sure, again, we are operating at scale. We have all the things to standardize our operation, and we don't want to think about whether someone added the right tags within their automation or not. So Torque will do everything in that area for you. So any of those 4 resources during the deployment process, without saying that or specifying that in the deployment itself, was tagged with my name, with the fact that I'm doing a demo here, with the fact that this is the space or the organizational unit that we are now operating under. That was the original configuration. And with that, by the way, with those tagging, it's not just that your FinOps organization can get a lot more standardization around what is deployed and can really dive into how to optimize. You can also get great visibility into the operation using Torque. And I will show you some of the reports Torque provides in a few minutes. Now, we've deployed here something with 2 different building blocks, but let's move and take a look at how we actually bring those assets and build a configuration, build a blueprint. So I'm going to move to a different space. This space has no blueprint, as you can see, but it has repos attached to them, to that. So repos are usually are the places where we will store our ISC at. It might be GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. It might be an S3 bucket. But what we want to make sure is that we can go in and figure out what assets are there. And Tor can go, and it has a discovery capability that really browses through everything that's in that repo and shows us that here are some Terraform modules, here are Helm charts and Kubernetes manifests, but here are some CloudFormation as well. Now, this is going to be a very simple example using an S3 bucket, but in one click, Tor created a manifest, which is actually the blueprint that we can now deploy. Now, let's take a look at that blueprint quickly. And again, what I've just done is pointed Torque at existing asset, and with no effort at all, this blueprint is already launchable. So I can choose in what subscription to run it. I can choose the region, and that's it. This S3 bucket will be created. Now, in the configuration itself, you can see that we've separated the configuration into 3 sections. What are the inputs we want the user to insert? For example, the bucket name, and the default bucket name obviously comes from the CloudFormation itself. The outputs, again, we took that from the CloudFormation configuration, and the grain section, which is actually how to execute this configuration. Now, this might be a very naive example, but if we go into something a little bit more exciting that involves past services and application, it might look like this. So in this case, we have 3 different grains, 3 building blocks, and the YAML behind it is exactly the same. So the bar for designing those kind of blueprints, configurations is really, really low. You just need to understand the fact that you need to define the inputs, the things the user needs to fill in, the outputs, the things that the user will get after the orchestration, for example, and database connection string, a web UI link, etc., and the building block configuration themselves. And here you can see that it's not only that the blueprint itself is really easy to build, it's also the grains. So once you've discovered the asset, everything you need to know really is the input and output concept. And this RDS instance, for example, has a bunch of inputs and it has a bunch of outputs. And the connection string is obviously something that we really want to use. And we want to use that in order to point the application to that. So the output of this grain, the connection string, we want to use that as an input for our microservice application. And let's take a look at how this is being done. So the connection string here is an output, and here the connection string as an input, and we are basically piping this in. So what I'm trying to say is that we are normalizing the way you're using IACs to a single interface that you need to learn or you need to practice. And regardless if that's CloudFormation or Terraform or Helm in this case, it's very, very easy to use. So starting to use this mindset of reusable building block. So this RDS can be defined once and then repurposed, reused over and over again in multiple different configurations in the system or in the organization. This is a really, really easy practice. And that really brings you more control, because you need to maintain much less, but it gives you the ability to fulfill much more requests and operate at scale. Now, you see 3 different buttons here on each and every one of the building blocks. And this is something that I really want to emphasize as well. So as we kind of already discussed, anything that's being deployed, we want to investigate that, and we want to show you what resources were deployed out of it. So here are all the resources that were deployed as part of that RDS instance. You can see the VPCs, the subnet. It might be interesting for the end user, it might not. For the operator, over time, we want to make sure that we are covering 2 very important aspects. One of them is drift, and the other one is updates. So in case something bad will happen with one of these resources that were deployed as part of this RDS module, we want to make sure we are alerting you about drift. So let's say an IP was changed or some subnet was changed in the cloud, maybe on purpose, maybe not. Torque is constantly monitoring that, and we will notify you about that drift. We will tell you about the fact that there is drift. We will show you what the drift is, and we will also allow you to revert back to the original configuration. That way you can use this RDS module 100 times in different permutations of the application, but stay in control and know for sure that this is how the RDS is running all over those 100 different configuration or different environments. Now, the update capability is another very interesting aspect, where in some cases you want to roll out changes for that RDS, and you want to apply them maybe for 20% of the deployments, maybe to all of the deployments because of a security risk. So what we will do, again, if a change will be introduced into that module in the original repo, we will notify you, and we will give you the opportunity to deploy that to maybe 1, maybe more of the environments. Now, in development use case, the developer might push changes for this Helm chart or for the underlying application, and he would like to update his deployment to get the latest and greatest version. And this is all up to the role-based access control module. And if you want to allow that, that will be allowed. If not, it won't be allowed. Now, we've talked about the end user a lot, and I want to show you another very common example with VMs. It's going to be Terraform again, but as you kind of noticed, it might be different ISCs. What's important is that even though sometimes you've got a very monolithic deployment model, in this case, it's 1 Terraform file or module, it's very long, it includes a lot of code, it will create 28 different resources in the cloud, and this is, let's say, a testing environment. There is no chance, or it's unlikely, that your testers will know what availability zones are and gateways and target groups are. What they really need are the VMs or the application itself. So in this case, it's a WordPress deployment, and they can obviously get the WordPress link, go into it. It's going to be under AWS ELB. It's going to be easy to access. But what if they want to play with it and access the VMs? So Torque allows, or as part of the enablements, the infrastructure enablement for the consumers, Torque provides a simpler view of the deployment. Instead of showing a very long list of resources or showing how this was deployed, we want to show the valuable assets or the right things for the specific end user. So you can define that. And in this case, we want to show the 3-tier aspect of the application. Here's the database, here's the WordPress, for example. Now, if it's a VM or if it's a cluster or if it's a database, we want to give you also day 2 capabilities on top of that resource. Here is a VM, for example. Again, here are all the information about it, but now you can also restart that or power that off if it's not needed. You can even go into it through this web portal and connect to SSH, RDP directly from Torque without knowing the authentication method or without no need to open a VPN access. So the automation producer, the infrastructure expert, can really focus on designing this deployment model, deployment automation. It might be Terraform, it might be CloudFormation, but at the end, we will give him all of those layers of cost control, policies, enablement, user experience, So his end users can really use the infrastructure as easily and as quickly as possible. Now, let's talk about cost and policies, because I feel like we haven't really talked about that yet. And I'm going to move quickly to the administration section of Torque. And here, a system administrator or the account administrator can see a lot of things. One of them are the global policies. So policies are created in the organization level and can be set differently for different LOBs or teams or spaces, as I called them before. Now, policies can be how much an environment should cost, how much an environment duration should be, all kinds of limits, but also all kinds of things that are related to compliance. For example, it's impossible to deploy this and that VM size in Azure. Why? Because this is maybe deprecated or maybe too expensive. All of these policies are based on OPA, Open Policy Agent, and almost any action in Torque will be validated against them. So for example, when I deployed an S3 bucket before, Torque checked to make sure that S3 bucket is not public. Why? Because we don't want to open up our data to the public domain. So all kinds of interesting policies here. And what I want to say is that it's not always true or false. Sometimes we want to have some user interaction to really choose if we want to breach the policy or not. In other words, we want to have the ability to create approval flows based on OPA policies. So maybe an environment up to $10 an hour is okay, but between 10 to 100, that's questionable. So in those cases, you can write a policy that will say, if it's in that range, pop up an approval flow through maybe ITSM tool like ServiceNow, or maybe send an email to your CFO to approve that, or maybe to your group manager. So those policies can be basically can script your organizational policy, your compliance policy, and then also have some flexibility in them. So that's the policy section. Now let's move on to cost and reporting in general. So visibility over the operation is extremely valuable. And if you're using AWS CloudFormation or AWS Service Catalog, I'm sure you're using multiple accounts, maybe more than one cloud, maybe hybrid with an on-prem environment. And you pretty much missing the big picture. You want to see everything. So obviously Torque is that component that can give you visibility to anything, to all of these. We see a lot of customers using that for multiple clouds, multiple accounts, multiple subscriptions, etc. And first of all, you want to see what's going on. So what's going on is usually how many things are running, how many environments, how many resources, how many users are using the systems, how many things are in bad state right now. Maybe something is failing to terminate. All right, an environment that was up should go down in some point, and something is failing. We want to see how many uptime minutes or how many environments are up and running. We want to see the breakdown per specific space or specific team. We want to see who is using how much by name, and we want to see exactly the right data about whether environments are now in good state or not. And this is all in this activity report. Now, this is not yet cost information, but this really gives you an overview over what's going on. And usually your KPI as the infrastructure manager, cloud admin, are really tied to what's going on in this report. How reliable are the environments? How stable are the environments? How many environments are running out of a specific capacity? So this is all can be answered using this specific report. Now, moving to the cost aspect. So all of that activity obviously costs us something in the cloud. And regardless of, again, how you deploy that, it might be CloudFormation, it might be a different way. Torque will collect the actual cloud cost of those resources based on the AWS API, cost API. And using those labels or those tags that were added throughout the deployment process, we will know exactly how much things cost. But it's not just that we know what was deployed through Torque. We have the right business context for that. So we know who deployed that, for what reason, in what group that person is, et cetera, et cetera. So we can provide a very easy way to look at cost over time in the different departments or by different people. So our customers are using this cost dashboard, not to say that this is to replace other FinOps tools, but the operation people can really use that to understand what's going on in the system and where are they investing the budget and whether that's the right way or not. Now, using Torque, we are also adding optimization capabilities and abilities to really save some money for those departments and make sure we are not running out of budget. So we haven't really touched on that a lot so far, but environments that are being managed can be managing many different aspects. And sometimes we want to make sure that environments are optimized and specifically cost optimized. So let's go back to one of the environments we've seen before and talk about it a little bit. So again, we've deployed this. The infrastructure guy really invested in this Terraform module. Torque understood that there are a bunch of VMs here. They're not huge ones, T3s, not a big investment, but still, if that's a non-prod environment, why not turning off these VMs or shrinking clusters or reducing nodes for databases when these environments are not needed? So Torque, in this environment management notion, provides something we call workflows. And those workflows are predefined automation that you can schedule to monitor your environment, to run something to check for specific metrics. But in this case, we can take this non-prod environment and turn that off on 10 p.m., turn that on 8 p.m., on 8 a.m. Why is that? Because we want to make sure we are optimizing the resources as much as possible. By doing that, some of our customers reduce their cloud spend by between 50 to 80%. So just think about this huge black hole of non-prod environment that you have out there in the different clouds, just turning them off every evening, turning them on or stretching them over the weekend, just that can reduce the cloud spend by a lot. And we have specific reports just for that to show that and also highlight where the potential savings. So this is, for example, how much we pay, how much we save. In this case, because we are really doing just ephemeral use cases in this environment, it's not huge. But what's interesting is that deploying things into the cloud, we need something to understand what's going on in there and to highlight for us what are the potential savings. Where is the opportunity for us to save? Again, from an operational point of view or from an operational person point of view, we always want to make sure budget is not met or we are under the budget. So in this report, you can see, again, it's small numbers, but we can see a bunch of environments that were powered off, a bunch of environments that were idle. And that idle time, this 11 hours of idle time, is something we can reduce to less. And you can see that we actually have done that. So here we identified 9 hours, 11 hours, and then we did something to reduce that. Now, that something is, in this case, was to enable workflows to tear down environments, tear down VMs when not needed. But what's interesting is how did we identify that idle time? And that idle time is basically based on a machine learning system or machine learning patterns that we built behind the scenes that will go through your workloads and understand what's going on in them and provide you the visibility and show you that you've got 11 hours of idle time that you can reduce. Now, we provide you with the reports to highlight the opportunity, and then also the way to operate versus that opportunity to basically reduce your cloud spend. So this entire system, or in this entire section about cost, we're really talking about cloud efficiency. And obviously we can apply that to your on-prem environment, and you can see some on-prem deployment blueprints here. And we have a lot of customers that are doing that with vCenter or OpenStack or other hypervisors on-prem. And there, the opportunity is not in maybe in dollars, but in CPUs, memory, efficiency on top of those on-prem resources. And sometimes you can really optimize to the point where you maybe don't need to buy more hardware. So this is really, really good. So I think with that, we pretty much covered the main three topics I kind of wanted to cover. Colin, do we have anything in the Q&A section?
Yes, we did have a couple of questions come through. Timing is perfect. We only have about a little more than 5 minutes left on the session today. So we'll only have time to get into a couple of questions. This first one came in, and I thought this was interesting. They're asking if you need to use Torque's UI to launch environments.
All right, so that's a really good question, because so far I've really presented and talked only about the self-service UI. And obviously that's something that's really visually appealing, and you can see all the bits and bytes. But actually Torque is an API first product, meaning everything here is first deployed or first designed using an API, and then the UI comes on top of it. It means that anything you saw so far can actually be achieved and automate using the API. On top of that, we actually provide a lot of things that wrap that API and provides, let's say, an ecosystem of integrations that you can take and basically embed in your existing processes to use Torque. So we've talked a little bit about CI/CD. Jenkins is a great example. Jenkins needs environments almost any time to test against something, to deploy to something. So you can take the Jenkins integration, put that in your Jenkins server, use that in order to automate environments in Torque instead of running, CloudFormation CLI, AWS CLI directly from Jenkins. You will get all the benefits, right? The security, the policies, the tagging, et cetera, but Jenkins will use the API. You can use different tools. One very interesting aspect is Torque CLI. So this is a developer, usually developer really likes it. So a fully featured CLI using the API in the backend, but really meant for fast moving teams. We have the backstage integration, which is again for developers, developer experience, use cases, platform engineering, where you want to embed backstage in the organization, the IDP concept, and then really embed Torque as part of the backstage workflow to make sure all the environment orchestration automation is being done in the right way under the policies with cost awareness, but enable that infrastructure not through a self-service like Torque, but through backstage to the developers. And there are a bunch of other interesting integrations like ServiceNow and some others. So everything is through the API, and we've already packaged some of those very specific integrations for you. So feel free to go in and dig in the docs or in this page to see all of them.
Great. We had another question asking about authentication for AWS accounts. I thought that was a good one.
Great. So we've kind of presented different deployment things with different tooling, but Torque in general is working in an agent configuration. So we've got an agentless deployment option. Usually we see that our customers really prefer the agent way. By the way, if you go into our docs, which is docs.qtorque.io, you can really drill into everything. Torque is a SaaS product, and that means that we will need an agent in order to run your automation. Now, that agent might be deployed on Kubernetes or Docker image on an EC2 maybe, and the authentication is basically done with or using that agent. So we really promote the best practices by the cloud. In this case, for AWS, that will be, let's say we're using Kubernetes cluster, that will be a service account attached using OIDC to an IAM role. And that IAM role will be the way to authenticate into AWS in order to run your stacks in CloudFormation or running your Terraform from that agent. And by the way, that way, using the agent, all the things, basically all the resources, all the automation, all the IACs, everything stays within your cloud. So nothing goes out to Torque. Torque just being reported about the metadata and events, and everything else stays within the cloud. So this is a very secure way to really make sure everything happens fast. You got only the right permissions you need, but you got a lovely SaaS offering that's continuously updated with new features, and you don't need to worry about hosting that. So that's about the agent and authentication.
All right, that's just about all we have for time today. Thank you again, Tomer, and thank you to everyone for spending some time with us today. And once more, thank you to Corey in the background. Nobody sees him here, but he's helping to keep everything moving for us. Always appreciate that. We will be sending out the recording afterward, so you can review this session once more. For any more information, go to quali.com. You can learn more about Torque and create a 30-day free trial of the platform there. Thanks, everybody.